I'm Anthony Iannarino, the author of The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need, The Lost Art of Closing, Eat Their Lunch, and Elite Sales Strategies. The most beneficial advice I was ever given was don't think that any part of this is about you.
Ooh, don't think that any part of this is about you.
Yeah.
Anthony, when did you learn that? Who shared that with you?
My manager, when I first became a field salesperson, and when I was trying to say why us and why me and why our solution, he happened to be on a call with me, and and when you've been on a call with your manager, you know you're going to get some advice leaving the room, right? That's how it goes. So you're in the elevator, and he said, "Why do you think that this is about you or about us? Like it's about them." And I'm like, well, why are we talking so much about ourselves? Like, you guys gave me this binder, like, and he's like, nobody cares about the binder. Just get rid of that. Like, they just put it behind their desk. So if anybody asks them if they're working with a good company, they got all this proof. And I learned from him, like, it's really not about us at all. It's all about the client. And
Yeah.
that was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So how long ago, Anthony? Because I'm sure whenever that was, that's been carried with you.
1992.
Wow. That's when I graduated high school, man. So your first sales job was when I graduated high school. That's fantastic. So cool. Cool. So how has that served you, right? I mean, that's what this new book is all about, right? Elite sales strategies. It's all about them, not about us, right?
It has to be. I mean, they have a problem. They have results that they need to be better in some way. And you know more than they know about not everything, about how to get those results. They know a lot of things too. So you need to have this transfer of information where I'm one up and I'm teaching you, and you're one up and you're teaching me. And then we both are in a better position to have a conversation and to get better results. So that's it's served me for a very long time. I had it modeled though. So to be honest, I went and followed my manager around and watched him say almost no words in meetings. Like he would ask a question and then he would say something like, "Mm." And I'm like, "What is that? Like, what is that? That's not even a word, right?" And they would go, "Well," and then they'd keep talking. And they talked so much that he didn't have to say very much. And at the end, we walked out with a lot of deals.
Wow. So I'm gonna. You mentioned though knowing stuff, but not knowing stuff, right? Being one up and being one down, if you will. And so that's interesting. So I guess how do we know what we know versus how do we know what we don't know?
Oh, well, that's a very, very complicated philosophical conversation there that you just started. How do we know what we know? Uh, I'm going to say the way that I think about this is I'm one up when I have a set of experiences over a long period of time that allows me to see a pattern and to recognize something just like gut recognize it. Like I don't have to think about it. I've seen this before. I know what the right answer is. And it's just because you've done something long enough that you can see the patterns. It's very, very easy for you to make sense of them. But the person sitting across from you who's trying to buy, let's say I sell what I sell every single day, they buy it every 7 to 10 years. How could they know how to make a good decision? Well, they can't because they don't have any experience making the decision. So for a long time, Phil, we've talked about why us. We love that conversation. Marketing puts it right at the front of the slide deck. Like, tell them about the company, tell them about our legendary CEO that everybody loves his story. I mean, not really, but okay. And then let us show you these logos of all of the clients that we're serving that look just like you, Phil, by the way. And then I'm going to ask you a question like, what's keeping you up at night? And I'm going to tell you how my solution will solve it for you. We've done that for 40 years. For 40 years. That's a long time to do that same pattern. And if you notice this pattern and you recognize that everybody's trying to differentiate themselves in exactly the same way. Like That's not differentiation. When everybody's doing it in exactly the same way, you start to realize, like, if a salesperson comes in on Tuesday, call that person salesperson A, and then another one comes in on Thursday, call that person salesperson B, and you go to that person at the end of the week and say, "What was the difference between salesperson A and B?" And they'll say, "I think salesperson A is taller and has lighter hair, and salesperson B had a red logo. I know that for sure." And that will be the only difference that they could come up with, because the conversation was exactly the same, in the exact same order, with exactly the same outcome. And so we're not really differentiating in that conversation because of the way we've done this for such a long time.
Yeah. We can't differentiate by being the same as everybody else.
Mhm.
Seems like such an obvious thing. And yet we don't move off that. Like, here's the dime. Here's where we are.
Yeah.
I'm staying right here. And that's so interesting, right? Because it's not memorable. It's not helpful. It's not useful. And it doesn't solve any problems. It really, it's like, okay, well, you just wasted 30 more minutes of my time. Thanks a lot. I thought you were different, but you're the same as everybody else. So how do we, how do we get different here? Because I read a story in your book. You said it said that that the manager stayed for an hour when they don't normally stay for 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
then he left you more with his team. So how does that happen, Anthony? How did you do that?
But that was a tough one for me, because this person that came in, uh, I'm an Enneagram 8. That's a challenger or a protector. That makes me potentially a difficult person. Okay, so potentially. I can do that, turn it on and off whenever I want to. But he had the same sort of demeanor that I had, so I recognized he wanted what he wanted, and when he came into the room, he said, "Anthony, why don't you tell me about your company?" And I said, "Well, that's not gonna be a very interesting conversation because you already know what we do, and you're already very well aware of how this works." And he goes, "No, no, no, I really wanna hear about you." And I thought, "Oh," and it's not good to say no, like, to the first 2 things that your prospective client asks you, like, "I'm not gonna tell you that or the other thing." And it's like, "Oh, this is going well for me," right? So, I pivoted and I said, "Probably the best way for me to tell you about our company is to tell you the kinds of things that we're paying attention to and the things that we're concerned with right now." And so I pivoted and he accepted that. And I started just going through a lot of information, data, insights, helping him understand why he wasn't getting what he wanted. And the conversation went on for just over an hour, like an hour and 5 minutes, an hour and 7 minutes, something like that. When when he got up and excused himself, the person sitting across from me, a woman who was his counterpart, she said, "How did you do that?" Now I didn't know what I did. Like, I wasn't sure. I'm like, "What did I do?" And she said, "He's never been in the room with the salesperson for more than 5 minutes. How did you keep him here?" And I said, "I just think he was really enjoying the conversation that we were having and he was benefiting from it." And that's what I said. And I didn't know any other way to describe. He was interested, he was learning, he felt like he was getting a new perspective that would help him, and he stayed in the room all that time. Now, had I said, "Let me tell you, my company has been in business for X number of years," he probably would have said, like, "Thank you very much for playing. You game over, player one. Insert another quarter, try again." Like, it wasn't going to work for him. I don't know how I intuited that, but I had a feeling that if I would have gotten into that, he didn't really want that. It's kind of a test, I think.
Yeah. Well, coming at them with insights that they don't know, though, I
Yeah.
mean, that, to me anyway, it seems like, isn't that our job as sales professionals, to come at them with insights and information and maybe some things that we have seen keeps other people like them up at night, and maybe some answers to that? Isn't that right?
That'd be pretty good to do if you could do that. Uh, you would think that people like us that go out and sell the same thing every day would not need to ask somebody what their problems are. Like, after you've done it like 100 times and you know that there's 3 or 4 basic challenges that they're having, you should probably be able to take a pretty good guess without having to ask the question at all. because you are a subject matter expert. And the way that I think about this, Phil, is that I'm one up because I have the experience that they don't have. They're one down. So for me to move them out of one down to one up, I have to transfer all that experience and all of that knowledge and all of the things that I know to them so that they can make the decision that I would recommend that they make. Because they're not going to take that recommendation if they don't understand why they're making or why they're taking that decision. And the only way to get them out of one down is to give them the knowledge and the insights that you have so that they can look at it through the same lens that you're looking at. So that's how it goes. And believe me when I say this, when they take your advice and your recommendations, you did make the decision for them. So you did. Like, you may not know that, but when they took that advice, they took your recommendations and your counsel and they decided to do that, you made the decision for and with them because that's what you're supposed to be doing. Don't let them get hurt. Make sure they make the best decision for their business so that they can be successful and move forward.
Yeah. So you consult on what you do, right? So salesperson is consultant and helpful decision maker instead of salesperson as drag me through the pain and puke all over me about your company and why you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say if you ask salespeople, what does consultative selling mean? They generally say the same thing. I ask really good questions and I don't have any high pressure tactics. Okay, those are both good things. Nothing to do with consultative at all. Like, it has nothing to do with being consultative. Good questions can be helpful. There's no doubt about that. It's better to have a lot of good questions than to not have them. But consultative means I'm going to tell you how to make the best decision for your business. That's what consultants do. And so when you start to understand that it's about counsel, advice, and recommendations, and you leave those things out of this, and a lot of salespeople do because they don't recognize. Now, I'm going to say they don't recognize that they're one up, even though many of them are one up and they don't act like they're one up because they think, well, the client knows more than I do. They do. They do. They know more about their business. They may know more about their industry. They may know what's possible for their company and what's not possible. And in that case, now I'm one down. I don't know what they know. So I need them to teach me what I need to know so I can teach them what I know so that we can both get out of our one downness. So you're one down, I'm one down. I'm one up, you're one up, and now we have to figure out how we can have a good conversation so both of us end up in a position where we can help move the company forward, their results forward, to whatever their goals are. Like, if it's capturing new value, whatever it is, we have to figure out how to get that done. And it's
Yeah.
better when
So
we do it together.
yeah. So you mentioned their goals though, right? Not our goals. We want to work on their goals. So how do we find that out, Anthony? Is that something you feel that we need to know ahead of time? Is that something that they tell us? I mean, is there some helpfulness there so we can get at what that is?
The longer you're in a particular industry, the more you have a good sense of it without having to ask. So if you're in a vertical and you sell in that vertical all the time, you probably have it. But there is sometimes where you're one down and you don't understand their goals because maybe you don't do enough work in this industry to know. And then you're going to ask, and you can just say, a lot of people are looking at this as their main goal, like it's market share or whatever it is that you think it is. What does it show up like for you? And you might have to ask, there's nobody that's trying to change that doesn't have something that they want on the other end of it. And I would argue that sometimes what we do, I'm going to say when we're at our best, at least I'll say when I'm at my best, it has nothing to do with the solution at all. It has to do with the advice and the recommendations and the counsel. So I came out of temporary staffing, and a lot of times the best advice I could give the client was change your pay rate, change your shift, and have a different culture. They could take that advice and improve their results whether they bought from me or not, because that's what I recognized in discovery that they needed to do. And did they buy from me? For sure. They bought from me. But they took that advice that had nothing to do with my solution whatsoever. And this is the thing that I'm trying to help people understand. For some reason, this is the hardest thing I've ever tried to teach anyone. This is There's the sales conversation, and then there's the value of the solution. A lot of salespeople want to talk about the value of the solution because they've been taught get a problem, talk about the pain, just like you said, and then show them how the solution will solve that for them. If I would have just installed my solution instead of telling them that they had to make the changes that they needed to make on their side, I would not have gotten the results for them. I would not have. It would not have changed anything for them because it would not have changed the offer that we were giving people. So without changing the offer, you're not going to get a different result. What we underestimate is that the only way that you can get the preference to buy the solution, because the solution, Phil, is a hypothetical. It's going to create value for you. Okay, that's what you say. I've never felt any of that value. I have no idea if that value is real or true. I have no clue. You say it is because you have this solution, but they can feel the value that you create in the sales conversation. So they can feel that, like, oh, I didn't know this, or these assumptions that we've been working from are no longer accurate. And now we need to update these. And so all of those things actually count and score points for you when you're trying to create a preference. But we underestimate the value that we have to create in the solution. And we overvalue the solution as the value creation for the client, which will only be true if, in fact, they buy from you. Like, other than that, it was a nice hypothetical. And it's okay to have a hypothetical conversation. But if there was no value, right, for the client, then they're not going to buy.
Hmm. So that's salesperson as value as
Yes.
opposed to solution as value, right? That's how we can look at that, right?
And if the salesperson is value and they do a really good job helping the client think through their decisions, make good decisions for their future, then they will buy that and they will get the value of the solution after you get through that. There's no part where they actually get to experience the value of the solution and then you have the sales conversation. It goes in this one particular direction. Like, it only goes one way.
Yeah. But that makes so much sense when you say it, right? When we think about it. But then what happens? We have salespeople that struggle moving from commission check to commission check. So how do we be consultative and not have commission breath?
Uh, I started here. It's not about you at all. Like, the only way that you get the commission check is the other person buys. So everything should be about, how do I help this person? Like, how do I help this person do this and get this result that they want? Because if I can help them and they believe that this is the right thing for them to do, then I'm not going to have to worry about my commission check. But if I have to rely on the solution that they've never experienced, I'm incredulous. Like, I think I'm going to go with giving them a very good experience of the sales conversation rather than believing that the solution is going to change anything. And listen, the truth of the matter is, I don't care who you are or what you sell. I understand that you believe that your solution is the very best solution on earth. And I agree with you, just like I agree with your competitor who has exactly the same product and the exact same service, that they believe in their heart of hearts that it is the very best and there is no substitute. Uh, and so you go in and, again, we're differentiating in exactly the same way. And I think it's funny. I'm glad you think it's funny too, because a lot of people don't think this is as funny as we do, Phil.
Yeah. Well, it has to be though. I mean, you almost have to laugh at that when you actually look at it that way, right? Because we're all different in exactly the same way, which means we're all not different, right? That's like a double negative. And so, folks, if you're listening to that, right, Justin asked that question. The key is just take the focus off of you and to put it on them and to work on serving them and their needs and pouring insight into them and their needs, right? Anthony, you made that point a couple of times, and I wanted to circle back because it seems, right, once we say it out loud, we're different in the same way, that's an obvious statement. But so many don't see the obviousness of that, or to your point, they get angry. No, we're different.
Yeah.
No, 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 you're not. You're not different, right?
Yeah,
You're not.
your box is anodized aluminum, and mine is steel, like, and that's it. Like, it's both shiny. Like, I don't know, like we're not really all that different. The question is, how do you create the preference when you're in that conversation? And that preference is, so you don't have commission breath. What can you teach them? What can you help them understand that they don't already understand? How can you identify what their assumptions are? And remember, if somebody made a decision to buy something 7 years ago, the assumptions that they started with there are probably completely outdated now. Those assumptions need to be brought up to the modern time that we're in now and the reality that they're facing. Like right now, we're facing 8.5% inflation. There's only about 1.45 million people on unemployment. Pay rates are going up. When pay rates go up, people start passing off cost increases to their customers. And so it starts to spin up like it's spinning up right now. And people are wondering, like, okay, so when does this end? Like, we went from pandemic year to maybe a pandemic year to inflation to a war in Ukraine. Like, how do I make decisions in an environment where there's so much uncertainty? So you have to be the one to give them the certainty, but not the certainty that we've been giving them in the past 40 years. The past 40 years is, I want you to believe certainly that we are a good company and that we do really good work and that we have really good clients and we have a really good product. Worst possible beginning of a conversation that's designed to help the client change. So, what you want is certainty of negative consequences. Because the world is so uncertain, you now need to start doing something to make sure that you're going to be able to get results in the future in a different way than you're getting it now. And then once you give them the certainty of negative consequences, now you've made them uncertain again. And so now they're like, now I don't know what to do. Good. Now I got to give you certainty of positive outcomes. That's at the end. But we've moved it to the front to say, why us? Buy from us because you can be certain that we're a really good company. We're not there yet. Like we didn't even talk about what kind of change are we making? What kind of recommendations are you guys suggesting? Can we even do these things? Am I going to be able to get consensus inside my own company? All you do is you cause them to have more uncertainty that you don't want them to have and more certainty around something that doesn't really matter at this part of the conversation.
Wow. Yeah, it's so interesting, right? To get people to change, they have to accept that there's a problem first, not that you're the person to solve some what's this, right? So I think that's so interesting. Again, as you say it out loud, it's an obvious thing to me anyway. And I don't know if folks listening, they're like, I don't know, I don't get that, but I get that. I totally understand, right? We have to agree on the problem before we can agree that it's solvable. Before we can agree on who's to solve it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you take those 4 or 8 slides at the beginning that marketing put in, and you drag them all the way to the back of the presentation. And then
Yeah.
when it's time to say, here's how we're going to give you all these resources, and here's some of the things that we're going to show you so that you can be confident in moving forward. Yeah, we just get it backwards.
Cool. Okay, so that's doable. So one of the things though that you say in the book, and I got to tell you, I don't know, I took a little offense to this, Anthony. Don't build rapport. What's that, man? You talk about that. I'm like, that's one of your one of your ways to get in the frame of doing this. So rapport. Come on, man. Isn't that table stakes? Aren't we supposed to do that, Anthony?
Phil, I love those glasses. I love them. They're so great, man. Like, and you're going like that was super valuable for me. No, I would say the order's gone. Like, so it's easier to do the rapport at the end now because so many salespeople and so many other people in the decision maker's life waste their time. You should start with a strong agenda about why change. And then later on, you can have a conversation about rapport. You can talk to them about things that are more personal. I hope you get rapport, but I always have to give a caveat whenever I talk about rapport. If you're in New York and you're like, hey, how are you? They're going to say, like,
Eh,
F you, right? Like that in New York, that just means good morning. I mean, that's just like it's not an insult. It's just how we say you're not going fast enough for me, right? But you go to Alabama or Mississippi and you don't say like, Phil, how's your mama? I heard you lost your dog. I'm really sorry. I heard like if you don't go through that routine in the South, like nobody's going to talk to you at all. They're like, I don't know your people, and your people don't know my people, And so it's different. So you have to be very careful. If you're in Alabama, you better slow down and talk about your personal life very early. So there are different customs. Everybody thinks like, oh, Europe's different because it's all these countries. Wait till you get to the United States. There's a number of countries here too. I think about 5 of them.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, I like that though, starting with the agenda of why change and then putting rapport because we want to add value before we get personal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
of course, right? I mean, if we don't identify that there's any valuable here, why would I ever share anything personal?
Yeah. So if you wasted my time already, like if you spent the first 15 minutes trying to gain rapport, I'm already trying to figure out how soon we can end this conversation. Like, because you're not creating any value for me. The bar is a lot harder. I mean, it's a lot higher. It's a lot higher right now. The bar for creating value is just much higher than it was in the past when people weren't so overwhelmed. I mean, I found the stat the average person in a business gets 127 emails a day and sends 40. Do the math on that. So let's say it takes you 3 minutes to do an email. You're talking about something like 6 hours of email time that you would have, which is why people don't get back to you on email, is because it's an overwhelming amount of information coming to them. And it's difficult to keep up with all these things. The last thing they need is somebody wasting time. So if you get to a good agenda very, very early, and then they sit with you and they want to talk for 5 or 10 minutes about, personal stuff, good for you, do it. I just wouldn't put it at the beginning anymore.
Good. Okay, makes sense. So one or two
And
more
and the
things
reason
here.
you asked is because you're really a schmoozer. Like, everybody knows that about you. Like, there's no question.
Sure, but I would also, say I do my best to add value as quick as I can to the conversation, which is why you and I are friends.
Yeah,
Because we didn't initially start like I didn't know if you were married, you didn't know if I was married. We talked about sales and blogging right away back in what 2008, 2009. We got right to it, and then we became friends because we found value, right?
at a conference, yeah.
At a conference, right? So yeah, so awesome. So a couple more things here, Anthony. You and on page 72, you offer 18 things you can help clients discover. And number 14, you mentioned how to evaluate different approaches is of value for folks. Is
Yeah.
that like, let's talk about that because that was one of the ones as I read through them, I'm like, that one is one that I don't know that I would offer that as one of the clients. So talk about that and how we do that.
Yeah, sometimes there's more than one way to solve a problem, and sometimes you have the right model, and sometimes you don't. Like, I had a client who asked me to do some work for them, and the way that they wanted me to do it was just not something that would be right for me. It's just not right for me. And I told them very quickly, like, "I'm not the right person to do this with you." "Well, we want you to." "Yeah, but there's a better way for you to do this because you're trying to do something that I don't really wanna do, and I'm not the best person to do it. So let me give you somebody else." But that's not the only way to think about this. The other way is if there's one way that you can solve it, and then there's another way you can solve it, and there's a third way that you might be able to solve a problem for them or help them get the better results they need. You might have to discuss like which one of these is going to help us the most. And so there's one way to do it. And if these two factors are true, it's been beneficial to do it that way. And if these two factors are missing, then there's another better way to do this. And sometimes when you look at this through that lens where you're trying to figure out like what can they do, and that's where you're one down. Like what can they do? What are they going to be able to get an agreement on internally and things like that? But there's more than one way to get there. And when there is, you have to figure out like why would I do it this way instead of that way? If you've been in your industry for a long time, you may notice that some people can do something different because of the way they're already set up and somebody else can't because they're missing some of those components, and so you have to do it in a different way. And so you want to help them understand like what are your choices. People
Mm,
generally like choices, and it opens up a great collaborative conversation to figure out like what should we do together and what's possible and what do you think is the one that's going to work the best for you guys. And that's where you start to get consensus, but it's a collaborative conversation. Most people love the collaborative conversation. They don't love the commitment gaining part, but they do like that part a lot.
Yeah. Well, they want to be part of the solution and they want to help and they don't want to feel powerless, right? Because traditionally, salespeople kind of, neutered their customer, right? Oh, I know more than you and you're dumb. And I mean, they didn't say that, but that's ultimately what was happening. That was the differentiating factor was I have more information than you do. Therefore, I'm not one up. I'm almost 10 up, right? I'm way up here. And the only way to get to me is to buy from me, right?
If you believe that you're 10 up over your client, you're gonna be a 1 down for a very long time. Like, if you don't recognize that the person sitting across from you is super competent, they're smart. Now, they're ignorant, they have false assumptions, just like us. We're mostly ignorant. We know very little. What we do know, we know well. What they know well. And that's really you have to the reason that I got good at what I was doing is because I asked every client to tell me, like, "What the hell are you saying? Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't understand how you guys are thinking about this." And they would go, "Well, this is how we think about it." And then I started to get less dumb over time, less ignorant. I mean, and it was just because I was not afraid to expose the fact that I knew I was ignorant. And it's good when you know you're ignorant. I had a client that I wrote about it in the book, I think. His name's Dallas Mulder. He was with Limited here. And they kept talking about throughput. And now I was smart enough to to understand what that meant, right? Generally, but they were doing it like math. And I was like, I don't understand this. So I literally walked into Dallas's office and I said, I understand what throughput means. It's like how much goes through this process. And but you guys are doing it as math, and I don't understand the math at all. And he said, it's how much stuff comes through divided by the labor costs that you guys charge us. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, how does that work? And he goes, let me show you the spreadsheet. And he showed me the spreadsheet. And then 4 minutes later, miraculously, I'm an expert on throughput and distribution centers, except that wasn't true. But I acted like it was true when I walked into another distribution center and said, what are your throughput numbers like? And they're like, hey, this guy knows what throughput numbers are. I had the smallest amount of information possible to do that. And then they started educating me. You can always get an education from your clients. They want you to understand their business. They love talking about it. And the more that they can help you, the more that you can help them.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So let's wrap this up, Anthony. If I recognize right now I'm one down on probably a lot of stuff and I want to get one up, how do I get started on this journey?
How do you get started? First, you have to start looking at what you do. So the first thing is, as somebody who is one down that needs to be one up, what you're going to do is you're going to start by probably looking at other people who are one up and finding out exactly what they know and exactly how they have these conversations. The fastest possible way to understand how to have a good sales conversation is to go on a call with someone who is one up and who has all of the knowledge and all of the experience that you can steal from them. So what I'm telling you to do is take their language, take their strategies, take their tactics and pay attention to that. If you are relatively new to sales, one of the best things that you can possibly do is say, I'd like to sit in on a number of your calls, and to pay my way to having access to this, I'm going to write down every question that the client asks and every question that you ask, and I'm going to write down the answers, and I'll hand this off to you at the end. But I'm going to ask you to explain to me why you asked that question, what you were hoping that the client was going to say, and why you answered some questions the way that you answered them. That will speed your development faster than just about anything else.
Awesome. Love that, Anthony. Well, the new book is fantastic. Congratulations, my friend. Elite Sales Strategies is the title of the book. It's on Amazon or your favorite bookseller, wherever it is. Anthony, are you doing anything cool for a book launch or anything? Or is this just on to the next?
Well, the next book gets turned in the day before this book gets published. So it'll be for sale on Tuesday. I'm turning in the fifth book on Monday. And then I'm signing a contract for the sixth book today. So I got a contract for that. We will have a bunch of things that we can give you. So if you buy books, You'll get a workbook. If you buy multiple books, you'll get videos and some access to other stuff. So yeah, we'll have some stuff. And you can go to thesalesblog.com to find that.
Cool. Cool. So thesalesblog.com, if you're unfamiliar with, I will tell you that is one of my favorite places to go on the internet. I read your stuff, Anthony. I always enjoy it. I always learn a lot from you because I'm one down in many places and sometimes I'm even one up. But I appreciate you, my friend. Thanks so much for sharing some time with me.
Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.